Let us now look at the third section in the module on gender. It's a poem written by Lee Mokobe. As the title indicates, it's a poem that reminds us that any discussion on gender issues should not be restricted to the male female binary alone, but should include the sexual identities beyond these two categories. Transgenders, that is, people who do not belong either to the male or female category, suffer severe discrimination everywhere. They are denied recognition as human beings and are treated in the most inhuman manner. It is this situation that this poem identifies. Lee Mokobe is a young South African poet who has earned much recognition as a slam poet, a TED talker, and an LGBTQ activist. He founded an organization called Vocal Revolutionaries. It's an organization that encourages the youth to express themselves and to find a sense of self worth through their art and poetry. Lee Mokobe writes and talks mainly about the identity crisis faced by people who do not belong, like him, to either the male or the female categories. Lee Mokobe is a slam poet. Now, slam poetry refers to a kind of performance poetry. Unlike a traditional poem, a slam poem is not published initially as a printed work, but it is mainly recited before an audience. A slam poetry session is a dynamic session where the audience responds to the performance spontaneously, either praising it or slamming, or rather criticizing it. And slam poems are largely based on the life and experience of the poets themselves. And this is one such slam poem. What It Is Like to Be a Transgender is a poem that expresses the great identity crisis that the speaker here faces as a transgender. The poem talks about the difficulty of living in a world which can only tolerate people who belong either to the male or female category and which excludes a person who belongs to neither of these categories. The poem takes us on a journey through the poet's life from his childhood to adulthood. He explains how his childhood was unlike that of other children. He begins the poem with an indirect reference to the ceremony of baptism. But while the other children could carry on as normal kids, his life after the baptismal ceremony was covered with uncertainty. His body, which was different from that of others, was a mystery, a mystery of anatomy. He got no solace or comfort from God either, and he became withdrawn when he realized that he was unlike other children. But this silence, however, did not solve any problem for him. In fact, it continued to torment him even further. Sensing the little boy's difficulties, the mother tried to comfort him and give him solace by telling him that unlike other children, he was a marvel, a miracle, a wonder, because he could choose to be what he wanted, a boy or a girl, which was something that other children could not choose. So, with that sense of relief, the little boy grows up and he lives his childhood days playing, and doing everything else that any other child of his age would do. He would run around, he would smile his toothless grin when the milk teeth fell, and he would have wounds on his knees as any other child. But this game of hide and seek with reality was okay only up to the age of around 12, because by then adolescence had set in, and it was like tightrope roping. It was a tightrope walk between the stage of an awkward boy and an apologetic girl. He could sense himself belonging to both categories, and it was beginning to get difficult to live a normal life. As he grew up during his teenage years, his aunts and other relatives kept ragging him since he wasn't girlish enough. And they kept reminding him that he would have to be more womanly in order to get married. He tried to escape the ragging of people by remaining lonely, but people kept troubling him. In school, they intruded into his privacy and began calling him a lesbian. All through these ordeals, however, he felt more like a man than a woman. He says he felt more like the male Ken doll than the female Barbie doll. He describes how difficult others were making his life for him on account of his body, even though he himself was trying to accept his body as it was. He uses the image of a home which we never abandon, even if it is in a very bad shape. He had similarly accepted the peculiarity of his body and was trying to live as comfortably as possible with it. As he matured into adulthood and began to live life like a transgender, his mother became more and more anxious. She kept worrying that her son would meet a similar fate as other transgenders like Maya Hall, Layla Alcorn, Blake Brockington, all of whom had either committed suicide or been killed early in life. The mother kept associating her son's body with images of death, like a mausoleum, that is, a memorial erected for a dead person, or a casket in which dead bodies are placed. She was worried that her son would face a situation like Bruce Jenner, the Olympic champion, who, in spite of all his success as a champion sportsperson, had to undergo a sex change and became a woman named Caitlyn Jenner. The speaker compares the life of a transgender to a mere footnote, an asterisk mark in a world where everyone's claim to equality gets noticed except that of a transgender. The poem now moves on to talk about the great denial of human rights to the transgenders. Nobody ever treats them or considers them to be human beings, as a result of which these people are made to feel like ghosts. In other words, society treats them like invisible parts of the society. They are rendered invisible, they are rendered irrelevant in society, as a result of which they feel as if they are ghosts rather than human beings. And the society looks at their sexuality as a kind of perverse act, something that they do not trust the transgenders for, and they just treat the transgenders like spectacles for them to ogle at, for them to ridicule. And once they have had enough of ridiculing and making fun of their oddity and their queerness, they just throw them out, like as if they regurgitate the food after they have had their fill, or after they've digested what they want. And they make the society makes the transgenders feel as if they are like the skeletons in the cupboard that people should be ashamed of, that the world should be ashamed of. They treat them like objects in a museum which is put up there for people to stare at. And with this kind of treatment meted out to them by society, it is no wonder, the poem says, that so many of them are talked into their coffins. In other words, they embrace death as a better way of existence than living in a world where they are treated like objects of ridicule. And even after death, it is not as if the ridicule leaves them. It is almost like having one's gravestone spelling one's name wrongly. That is the kind of insult which is heaped on the people who belong to the non-normative categories. And the way the world makes them feel ashamed of themselves in life and even after life. The concluding part of the poem talks about the tragedy that is writ so large in the lives of transgenders. It is no wonder, says the speaker in the poem, that so many boys, so many young transgenders waste their lives because of the kind of ridicule that they encounter at every turn in life. Their life is made to go to waste, to rot away. Uh, Even when they attend school, because of the taunting, the constant taunting of their classmates, they end up spending more time in the hallways rather than in the classrooms. And it is almost as if they are treated like, a subject of conversation in classroom discussions, and are judged so cruelly even before the real judgment day comes in their life. It is as a result of this kind of taunting from their classmates and friends and others that more and more of them end up committing suicide. It is presented in a very painful way in the poem. He says, oncoming traffic embraces more transgender children than parents. They walk into traffic. In other words, they take their life because they feel so unaccepted in society. And it wouldn't be long, he says, before these suicide notes become redundant. In other words, there would be so many of them that and each one would convey more or less the same kind of pain, that they would all seem alike, and that is why they would feel redundant. They're made to feel as sinners for the bodies that nature has given them. And even before they reach a stage where they can act with equanimity and learn to accept their bodies, they are made to feel like sinners. It is almost as if God treats them as if they are like the children of a lesser God. And they feel, they are constantly made to feel that none of God's miracles work in their case. It is as if God didn't save all this breath and mercy, as if their blood is a different kind of blood and not something that deserves God's mercy. It is at this kind of juncture that he feels that there is no more need in uttering any prayers, because the prayers in any case would be unanswered. And that is why he ends the poem on a note of, I don't care, because probably whether God has listened to my prayers or not listened to my prayers, it does not make any difference. He's reached a stage where he has given up on, praying for any kind of solace in life, and probably looking for ways within himself to embrace the kind of solace that he needs. So that is the poem which takes us into the world of the people who belong to the marginalized sections of the community. What Lee Mokobe says here about the transgenders holds good for people of any marginalized category, in the way that they are made to feel unaccepted by society, and in the way that they are made to feel like lesser human beings. It's a powerful poem which renders in very strong terms the very realistic suffering that transgender is made to encounter in his or her life.